Hello, lovely people. I'm Sinead, and welcome. I was going through my wardrobe, trying to find a shirt to wear, and noticed that unfortunately my favorite flannel shirt had developed. You see this lovely bit of wear right here. It has well, this is a hole. It is gone right here. And this is where, it becomes a work shirt or whatever, and you don't wear it when you want to look nice, or when you just want to look clean and presentable. Maybe it holes in your clothes kind of takes it to that level that I'm not gonna wear that where somebody can see me kind of space. And what I want to share with you is what you can do if you need to salvage that shirt, or you just want to salvage that shirt for a little bit longer. And we'll go over that today. But the first thing you're going to need is the first thing you're going to need, did I say that right? The first thing you're going to need is a piece of fabric to patch it. It's not going to be against your skin, so all that's important is that it cover the hole. It doesn't have to match or anything because it's not really going to be visible. So you'll need that and sewing thread and a needle and scissors, and you're ready to go to patch this. A seam ripper might be handy we're going to take the collar apart, and you're going to use it, but I'm going to show you how to do this repair to salvage that shirt so you can get a little bit longer wear out of it and have it look decent. So I'm turning the camera around now. Okay, if upon closer inspection you discover that in addition to this hole you have wear all along the edge, and it looks like it's gonna just wear out really soon, and you're gonna have holes in those places too, you can make a complete piece, and it's better to patch it all in one piece, cover the entire area with one piece, than it is to make multiple patches. It'll just lay better. So you can use the collar itself to create a pattern. So I would, might be the best bet is to lay out a piece of fabric and trace around the collar. Now I'm not sure I want to do that way, but we'll see. I kind of feel like it is wearing really thin right here, but I'm not 100% certain that I want to go that far in repairing this shirt. I may just repair the obvious hole. That's a decision you have to make. But the first thing we're going to do is there is a seam that holds the collar onto the shirt. So usually your collar and this neckband are separate pieces, but not always. But there will always be a connection point. Your collar is always removable from the rest of the shirt. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to take out that seam so that you can take it off the shirt. I just also wanted to say that this piece of fabric is another shirt. And I had a shirt that was too short in the sleeves and was uncomfortable. And at the time, I just decided that I would rather turn it into something else. So I made a pillow cover out of the body of the shirt rather than trying to make it a comfortable shirt. And so now I have the sleeves, and I have turned the other sleeve into doll clothes, and so I've still got this one sleeve. Then we're going to use it for patching this. So I am going to go off camera with my seam ripper, and I am going to take this seam all along here out, and I'll come back. And you don't have to remove the button. It might make it easier, but you don't have to do that. At this end, you're going to have a buttonhole, and you can't do anything with that, or you shouldn't do anything with that. You can always hand stitch it, but you cannot machine stitch it again. So unless you want to do a hand stitched buttonhole, maybe you need to repair it and you need to do a hand stitched buttonhole. But if you don't have to mess with it, don't. I knew I was going to struggle to get this started because it's really hard to see the actual seam. And I got in here and managed to pull a couple of stitches, but it wasn't coming loose. So sometimes it'll help if, and this is usually on the inside of the shirt, if you grab this and pull it to where you can just see the separation of the stitches and use pulling it like this to help get that seam undone. And once you've got the inside seam undone, there is the seam on the outside, which you could probably do at the same time here if you can see it, by pulling out a few of these stitches. Like I said, where it goes over the darker fabric, it gets harder for me to see. There's no contrast. I mean, that is the point, isn't it? When you sew something together, you don't want the seam to be seen. But see, I've got, there, it's started. And once it's started, you can get in there and see where the seam comes together on the shirt and take those out. It makes it easier, kind of pulling on it a little bit. But be careful, because we are dealing with a fabric that's kind of, you know, it's already begun to come apart or wear out for whatever reason. And hopefully this part is still sturdy enough that doing this isn't going to be a problem. I suppose that would answer, you know, if it starts to disintegrate on you, then it's not really salvageable. Rag bag's the only thing it's good for. Hey, do you have a rag bag? Do you even remember what rag bags are for? Or even know? Let me know in the comments if a rag bag is something you're familiar with. We didn't have one. And it was so odd for me when I got married and set up house and there was no rag bag. And I had to figure out what I was going to do until, you know, such a time that I had something to retire, to become rags. This video will be airing in the week, the main birthday week of spring. So Arthur and Cloud have their birthdays 5 days apart, and this week this video is landing right between the two of them. And so that I hinted about a project I was working on that was a gift. Well, it's for that. Hey, and at this point, I'm going to get to take out the rest of that tag, which to me is great. That means there's nothing left of it. Anyway, so I'm really impatient to share that, but the gift is for the latter end of the week rather than already past. I was sitting here going, do I have their ages right? Every year it's do I have their ages right? It's never been easy. I don't keep track of my own age very well, so remembering how old they are has not been easy, and they aren't good at it. I'm just gonna say, they were never those kids who were like, you know, holding up their fingers and saying, I too, or whatever it is, you know, they just weren't those kids. Joey was the most disconnected from how old they were. They were kind of like, what's the point? Why do you need to know how old I am? Why is it important to you? You know, that's kind of how she responded to people asking, and how old are you? It was like, what the heck difference does it make? And I do wonder, what the heck difference does it make? But yeah, we left the 20s behind last year, the year before. Yeah, see, that's part of what I can't remember. Oh, that's what it was. Last year, everybody was in their 30s. This year, Joey turns 40, so that means that there's only 2 of them left in their 30s. So, yeah, odd things we think of while we're working on stuff like this. But I'm kind of, you know, excited by birthday season. It's much like Yule season. There's a gift getting. I'm the only one who doesn't have a birthday right now, and me and that estranged son. So it means, you know, 3 people to shop for, or make something for, or arrange a special something for. Oh, and that's another curiosity I have. So when I was really, really broke, which I'm going to say I'm really, really broke again, but when the kids were younger, it was kind of important to have a level of celebration to recognize their birthdays and the holidays, so they didn't feel left out. And because I homeschooled them, there wasn't a whole lot of peer pressure, but they were aware. They did have cousins, and they did see kids at other gatherings, so they were aware of what was going on in other people's lives. Plus, you know, commercials on the TV will tell you what's going on in other people's lives, or at least what they want you to think is going on in other people's lives. It's not always accurate. So I would make sure that if, you know, the only celebratory stuff was paper chains made from, you know, a newspaper that I picked up from a neighbor's, you know, like I had a neighbor who would let me have stuff when he was done with it. And so, you know, sometimes it was newspapers, sometimes it was other things. I don't remember. I just remember he was a real sweetheart. And in fact, we had a push mower. I was pregnant, and we were, I was mowing the lawn because, as per the usual, my workaholic husband wasn't available. And our rental agreement, because of the neighborhood we were in, said something about maintaining the lawn to a certain, it wasn't an HOA, but it was something like that kind of micromanaging deal. And there wasn't much lawn there to mow, so I was out there probably the wrong time of day. It was really freaking hot, mowing, and with a push mower, you know, so it's heavy labor. And he comes over and he says, "Do you not have a gas or electric mower?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't. All I've got is a push mower. Mowing's got to be done." And he's elderly, so he didn't offer to mow my lawn. I don't blame him. But he offered me his mower so that I could mow the lawn more easily. He had an electric mower. It was my first experience with, you know, minding the cord, which I did just fine. But it was an interesting experience to do such a thing. So I am, story time here, sharing. And if you have anything similar to share, please do. I'm going to finish this off camera, I think, and we'll come back to decide on the patch. So I've decided I am going to patch the whole upper part of the collar, not the collar band, because it actually is in good shape. It doesn't have a lot of wear there. All the wear seems to be happening on the upper part of the collar. So that's the part that I want to make sure is laying flat when I take an outline here. Or what you can do is just pin the collar in place on your piece of fabric as if it's the pattern piece. And the only place that is going to get tricky is when you're cutting this part. You'll need to cut it just below that and not nick your collar band. So, yeah, you may have to take precautions or draw that part, or, you know, like with a pencil or an erasable heat erase marker that, you know, for sewing, marking things. Or I gotten kind of irritated with those because it was like going along great. They were disappearing like they were supposed to. And then they got older and they stopped disappearing at all. And they started leaving really telltale lines. I found that very frustrating. Anyway, anywhere from 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, that 5 millimeters to a centimeter seam allowance. Whatever it is you want to work with tucking under. And sometimes tucking under more is easier and sometimes it's not. That's kind of luck of the draw. Maybe it's what you're good at. Maybe it's got more to do with that. So anyway, you'll note that this is curved. It is not straight across. And I wanted to make sure that I went with the grain the same way the piece was originally. Which handy that the fold of the sleeve was right on the grain so that I could put this on here. And this has the plaid on the grain, not on the diagonal to it or whatever. So it's easy to see to match it up. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this at 45 to the corner, leaving at least 1/4 inch. I'm going to, I'm going to go just past by folding that out of the way, the collar band out of the way. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do this side first. I think sometimes my 45s are not 45. Okay, now here's where it gets challenging. I can feel the seam allowance of the original, so I'm gonna just take it back and pin this out of the way and then cut right up against the fold, making sure I don't nick the fold. And we're going to try not to have extra fabric. You don't want to bulk this up too much. It's one of the reasons why I picked this fabric that I did, is that it's pretty lightweight. And I had the choice of some purple flannel, and I just decided that since it wasn't going to be against my neck, it was okay to use something else. If I'm doing a patch that's going to end up in a tender area, a more sensitive area like your neck, because after all, we hate tags. And if it's going to end up there, I might go ahead and use the flannel. I might use the flannel on something that's not flannel. But that really depends on the type of patch I'm doing and its purpose. If you're patching a twice-turned collar, it's not actually twice-turned. Say you've already done what we're doing today, and you want to make the shirt keep going because you need that work shirt, then you would be patching the side that's against your skin. Which we could totally do this and leave it, against the skin. Now, one of the things I just did, which is kind of a boo-boo, if it's important that the pattern be right, or if your collar's a little weird shaped, say it's for some reason whiter on one end than the other. Can't imagine a scenario for that, but say it is. I've got the wrong side of the fabric against this, and if I was using, if you have the side that needs to be patched facing up, then you need to be putting it against the right side of the fabric. If you've got the side that needs to be patched down, then you need to put it on the wrong side of the fabric. So I should have flipped this, but it's symmetrical, so it's not important. Now we're going to take this out of here, put it on this side, and noting the curve and the amount of seam allowance you left, cut in to this so that you, on the curves, it's easier to get it to turn under. Don't cut the whole seam allowance, just like when you're clipping and making something from the beginning. You don't clip all the way to the seam. You clip almost to the seam. And you might be able to do this on the machine. I find hand stitching to be my friend. Like, I wouldn't even attempt this on a machine. I just don't feel that confident. And I should move that pin cushion closer. So I'm going to pin, you know, I've tucked it under. And I am going to pin it in place, making sure that I keep my seam allowance, you know, beyond it, up above, on the upper part of the collar. And don't fold under, don't get greedy down here with the seam allowance. Which, yes, I struggle with that. That's why I'm saying it. And you're just going to pin it in place across here. And what I'm going to do when I stitch it is I will not be stitching into this part on this seam. I won't be stitching into the collar. I will be hitting the upper part of the collar band so that I'm stitching into the undamaged fabric when we get to the hole. And I guess that would be, you know, the thing is that, and if you have to patch your collar band, cut out the pieces separately. Cut out the collar part and then straighten out your collar band to whatever straightness it is, which is going to have an opposite curve, it looks like. Well, on my shirt. Really depends. Sometimes they're perfectly straight, but it looks like this one had an opposite curve originally, and you can tell that by looking at the grain of the fabric. I have the lovely advantage here that my pattern on my fabric also runs with the grain, so that I can use that pattern to help me see that this was originally curved in the opposite direction of the original piece. And not all collars are done the same. You can't guarantee that it's going to be that way, but you just look for it so that if it is that way, you're matching that, and you would cut these two pieces separately. And then you have the option of just sewing them together at this seam, like a new, and applying them all at once. And then just, I would take a shallow little tacking stitch along here so that you knew that it was attached there, because otherwise it'll fold funny if you did, you know, the stitching it together. If you don't do the stitching it together, and now that I'm on here, yep, I get to redo it. I am too far over. I did not pay close enough attention to the end and where it was landing. It was past here, but not far enough. I'm going to just back up. Well, I don't know where that just went. It's like seam allowance just disappeared. So anyway, you can stitch them both on in exactly this same fashion, whether you're doing the collar band or whether you're doing a patch on the collar. you just, you can patch it as a single little round, you know, little piece. And, but I would tuck in, I would make sure that, like in the case, if I was just doing the one little hole, I would still be stitching to the collar band along here, like meeting it right up against it, instead of, let's see if we can get this really clear. Okay, so there's my hole, and that is right on the edge of the collar, and the collar band right seam is right there, and you would want to take this, and it just, if you attach it right here to the collar band, it makes it fold like it's supposed to. And you run into less problems with how your collar acts. You don't want your collar giving you trouble and standing up, because, well, then the patch shows. So once we've got this all pinned on, first stitch along here, and then we can go back and tuck in, trim away excess in places like this, and pin it, and then we're going to stitch it with just inside, or actually fold it out here, and you'll be, can you see that? The seam right here, you'll be stitching into that seam so that on this side it's not visible. The idea is to keep it invisible from this side, which used to be, this used to be the underside of your collar, but when you put it back on your shirt, it is going to be the outside. This is going to be the new visible part. This will be touching your neck, and this will fold back and be the part you can see. And I totally would do this by hand, not on a machine, but like I said, if you're skilled with the machine, you might be able to come in here and do that. But if you do, you have to keep it invisible on this side. So keep that in mind. Yeah, and I'm getting picky about which needle. Silly. I'm over here. Do I want that one that's got the curve? Yes, my needles get curved after I use them for a while. They invariably curve to one side or the other. And it's not a problem per se. It's just what it is. And I'm going to wax my thread for this. It kind of helps with the tangling, but mostly I could just wax the ends, and it just helps with the threading. So you can put a knot in your thread and then come up, or do like I'm about to do, where I anchor it in place by taking 3 tiny little stitches in the same spot, making sure I don't get tangled on that needle. I have yet to find what this is called. When I was younger, it was tacking. But when I looked up tacking, it was something else entirely. So if you remember being taught what taking 3 little tiny stitches in one place to anchor your thread is called, please tell me. I really appreciate finding out what things like that mean, or what things like that are called. And it could be that it's just called different things in different areas. But I just went into the top of the collar band, and I would either use a kind of whip stitch, I guess, or a ladder stitch. And I much prefer the ladder stitch. So for this, I run a stitch along the collar band, and then run a stitch along the fold of the collar patch. And I don't know if I finished saying that, you know, when you're doing a smaller piece, just stitch it down like any other patch, but try and keep from interfering or causing the bulk here to, like, I don't like patching over the two pieces with one patch. It can work, but I don't like doing it that way. I'd rather have two patches and not patch into that area or across that area. I don't know. Maybe that's being ridiculous. And maybe it's because most of the time when I do this, I end up covering like the entirety of the underside of the collar. I always wait till it's too late. And story time again. I think since learning about doing this, and I give credit to a neighbor I had whose husband was a longshoreman, and they'd had plenty of times where, you know, he was laid off, and that always cuts into your clothing budget, doesn't it? When you have long periods of time where there's no income coming in. And he had to have a certain appearance for work. Okay, if you do what I just did, where I pulled it up too tight, pull it back out by grabbing the end where you knotted and just pulling gently on it. Or maybe not so gently. Anyway, she taught me about turning collars, which of course reminds me of twice-turned dresses of, what is it, Little Women? I think was where I read about twice-turned dresses, which is basically you have, your fabric has faded and it's not looking so great on your dress, and so you take it apart and reassemble it the other way around and wear it until it starts looking kind of not so great, and maybe you wear it longer than you'd worn the other side, and to wear the inside that had a little bit of wear on it when you turned it now is looking better. Okay, I have thread here from stitching from the oh, I know what's going on there. My looks like my top stitching in that area is just popped a seam, popped a little stitch. I just trim it away so it's not sticking out there. Maybe not the best choice, but something to watch for as it might start coming undone. Anyway, I kind of was fascinated by the concept of a twice-turned dress. I never had clothing that I could do that with, that was made out of good enough quality fabric to be able to handle that kind of turning. Didn't have a lot of dresses either, and no, you know, real need to do that, but it certainly applied to work shirts. And I think we're rougher on our work shirts, even when those work shirts are a white collar job. You can totally do this on a dress shirt. You might not want to put a bright color underneath because it might show if it's a white shirt. But that might, back in the 80s, it was really popular to do a white collar and white cuffs on like a blue striped shirt, which was a Victorian emulation of the paper collars and cuffs that men put on their shirts to absorb the oils and to make their shirts look clean. And you could do things to that paper to get it to last longer if you were not in an economic position to replace it, but it protected your shirt. And so that in the 80s, it was like visiting that contrast of and here in the US, calico means the flowered print. So you might have flowered or striped or It means a printed fabric, decorated, I guess, in some way. And I was just realizing that a calico in England means what Americans call muslin, unbleached muslin. And that's different. But yeah, your shirt could have been unbleached muslin, or it could be calico in the U.S. sense. I kind of wonder why we dominate or think we do. I think that's more it. We think we dominate terms like that, and then we use it and find out we are. There's a lot of other ways to refer to what we have. And when I was doing historical garments, it was kind of fascinating to me that, you know, as I read historical texts that were, a lot of them British, Janet Arnold got access to the clothing in the Victoria and Albert Museum, I think, and other places probably. I'd have to go back and read again because it's been too long and I can't remember, but everything, you know, that she was describing, I had to go and look up, or not everything, but a lot of it, to come to an understanding of what she meant. And one of the things that was clarified was we in the historical group thought that cotton meant the fiber, and historically it was a weave, a style of weave. And I was discovering all kinds of things like that where we use it to mean a fiber content, like which plant it comes from, and not, especially with the labeling laws that we have. And when originally it was a style of weave or a style of making something. And I was trying to think of another thing that was like that. So I had some friends who thought that cotton was historically accurate for 17th century England, and everybody was wearing linen. They weren't wearing cotton when we're talking about fiber content here. Cotton, there was a craze later that brought cotton into mainstream clothing, but almost everybody was wearing linen from the plant, flax, from the flax plant. And yeah, and there was a cotton weave of linen. And so you really had to pay attention to your, whatever it was that you were reading as a resource, checking a list of clothing that, you know, they did inventories of their belongings. Sorry about shaking the camera. And people would take what was written down in those inventories as a proof of cotton clothing in an era that they were referring to the weave of that garment or whatever piece of fabric, not its fabric content. And because you had a lack of knowledge, it's much like historians and archaeologists deciding that something can't be done because they don't have a knowledge of how hairstyles work, or, you know, there was an assumption for a while that they had to be wearing wigs because that was too complicated a hairstyle. You couldn't possibly do that. And then a hairstylist came along and proved you could. And that's what kind of living history is about exploring what's possible with the tools at hand. What can you do? And re-examining these ideas that scholars just decided it had to be a certain way because they couldn't fathom you being able to do it. And one of the ways that you figure out if it's a weave, or I mean, if it's a style of the way of the thing being made versus the fiber content, is to look deeper into what was being shipped and what was the industry in the area from where it was being shipped, and finding out more about that. There's a whole history in the United States that most, well, I think it's safe to say almost zero Americans, almost, know about, that we had cultures coming here in 800 BC that were establishing themselves, and we don't acknowledge that. There is a tribe in northeastern United States that has blue eyes because there were people from Europe in that tribe in the early years. I mean, in that BC era, like 800 BC or 600 BC. They had regular trade with them. There are markings that, and it was just because the archaeologists at the time didn't recognize what they were seeing. They didn't recognize it as a written language that was marking what was going on. And, they were writing things like, George was here on the rock, where they would stop and drop off goods. And they had a lively little trade going on for copper, and other things. And then there was an African tribe in around New Mexico area with a lot of archaeological stuff that really ties it back to Africa. And we just kind of pretend like, that didn't happen because it somehow messes with our idea of how we got here and who's in charge. And it's high time we realize that everybody comes from someplace else. Everybody. You may have been here for thousands of years, but you came here, you being your ancestors, came here from someplace else. Always. And wherever we, as we theoretically try and figure out where we came from originally, and right now the theory is Africa, it's still just theory. We weren't there. We need to recognize that that's always mutable, that's ever changing, that history is an ongoing study, that you cannot actually know for certain. All you can do is theorize. And the more that we learn, like I never felt bad about people thinking that the cotton shirts were in an era that they weren't, because they didn't read the same information. They didn't study. They were, in fact, a lot of the reenactors weren't studying at all. They were just doing what they were told, which is fine. They're having fun and they're enjoying it, and they're kind of immersing people and exposing them to something different. And that is great, actually. I think that when we start going, this is hard and fast and true, and we are going to throw out anything that wasn't in a painting, and you better start realizing that sometimes the painter put your hands on backwards, and you're going to emulate that. That sometimes things were done in paintings to make a point, and you can't use even the paintings as a hard, fast rule of something. You just use it as to the best of your knowledge, and you study more, and the more you study, the more information you have. So, I've run out of story time. So Arthur's present was money that Joey put into something that I'm having a hard time recognizing what it was. Because I think it was a gaming thing. He will have received it by now. And I hope he doesn't pay attention to these. He's been uploading my videos. I just realized that. He uploads my videos for me because he goes into town where the pottery studio is, and we have a better internet connection there. And he takes advantage of that to upload it, because our uploading speeds out here have gotten to where one of these videos takes all day to upload, and sometimes like from early morning till way late at night all day. And that, if you ask your computer to do anything else while it's uploading, it gets cranky. And maybe it loses the connection. And maybe you got to start over. And it's massively frustrating. So I put the video on a thumb drive, and he takes it in, uploads it, and then I edit the upload with all the rest of the stuff that has to be added for YouTube. Crazy stuff. And it's Cloud's birthday present that I am still working on. And I'm waiting on parts for it too. I had to order something, and I hope, oh my gosh, I hope it arrives in time, and I hope it's the right thing. Because, you know, it isn't buttons, but it's like buttons, you know, where you want a certain piece to finish it, and I can make it look pretty decent and whatnot without it, but I want that thing. And I'm impatiently waiting on it. And this video is going to be 100, like hours long if I take you through this process. So I'm going to finish this and then show you something. Okay, I got to the end, and I tucked under for the next part of this and line it up on here. And you might want to go ahead and just line up and pin in place the whole thing. That way, if we shift, like we did before on putting it in place for that first seam, we know, and we can repin it. But it should look like 3 layers of fabric here when you're pinned in place. So you've got the what's going to be the main seam fabric, the fabric you're covering, and then the patch. And then as we stitch, we'll kind of go into the seam to pull it together and make it less visible. And I am again using the ladder stitch. So I'm just double checking here to make sure that I didn't pull to one side. And you can, if you don't want to take the time to pin it, or maybe you just don't like fighting with the pins. I don't like getting pinned, you know, like poked. It looks like, yeah, that's pretty good. So here's the, I'm down here in the collar band, and I'm going to come up into my patch and go into the seam. Then into the patch. And continue. And that's all you got to do all the way around. And if you're doing a small patch, you can do the same thing. Okay, we're going to pretend that I've stitched that all in place, because it's about to get really loud here in about 15-20 minutes. And I want to kind of conclude our process here. So this is the side that was facing, you know, like it was, this is how you took it off. And I do want to make this clear that to patch like I just did, you don't have to take it off. If you want to just change the look of your collar and patch it like this, you totally can. You do not have to take it off, but I want it to become the underside. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to flip it over. Now, one of the weird things that's going to happen, and I did take the button off, is that the button is going to switch where it's at. So you are going to sew this button closed and have to put a buttonhole in over here for this to really work. And you are going to reattach. I think the last time I patched the buttonhole so that I could sew on the button properly. Anyway, then you can reattach this. Again, if you're good with the machine, stitch this side on with the machine. You will definitely have to free, like right here, I'm stuck in the buttonhole. I would have to free this up in order to use the machine, but you could reattach this on here around to the shirt and then slip stitch this down, covering the edge, the raw edges to the inside where they came from. But you will then have what looks like a nice collar, repaired, and yeah. All of a sudden, all the words just left. So I will have to put a buttonhole in over here so that it will be with the buttons. And you can either do that, after you've got it reattached, you can do that with the machine. I will probably end up doing it by hand just because that seems to be the route we end up going too often. And then either patch this buttonhole or simply stitch through both sides as you apply your button. So I would arrange the button with the buttonhole going up and down if it's only a 2-hole button. That way you grab both sides and close the buttonhole in the process of applying the button. And then your shirt will be back together and usable and looking decent and no more holes in the collar. And if you can do, let's see, I think you can do the same thing, not being aware of how the wear on the cuffs. No, my cuffs aren't wearing in such a way that I can do that. But you could, if they were only wearing on the outside, you could flip them. But what I think I'm going to do to cover this wear here, because my sleeves are not long enough to shorten, which would be an option. You could fold this to the inside and then have a new wear edge out here. But my sleeves are already too short on this shirt, so I'm not going to do that. I think I'm going to get some bias and put it around here. And I'll need to go find, well, I think a solid would be better for this, and maybe a shade darker. That's my conservative take on it, is that to go like a little bit darker, if you don't have purple, go black or gray, and put bias binding around the edge to make it last a bit longer. And if your buttonholes don't hang on to the buttons anymore, stitch them closed on one side to make the buttonhole smaller. These are all, methods. This edge still looks like it's pretty good. It's got a little wear right there. So I would bias bind the whole thing and just stop right there. So that's another project I'll have to be doing at another time after I finish getting this collar back on here. I will probably wear the shirt several times before I get round to the cuffs. Good, yeah, the cuffs. Oh, that one's looking really worn. And I will either go find purple or black, and I will cut my own bias. You can go and buy bias if you'd prefer. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and that you have a delightful rest of your day and a wonderful week. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.